Good morning and welcome to SoundCheck with Dr. Greta Pope. My name is Jess Jones. I am the Center Director with the Coffer Resource Center here in Chicago, Illinois, and we are so glad you can join us this morning. We have been proud and happy to host these conversations over the last number of weeks, and we are glad that you can join us as we sit down today with Jay Disney. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. I want to be sure that you can join us in the conversation, so feel free to chime in the chat, whether you're with us on Zoom or on Facebook Live. And join us for future conversations. We're getting ready to launch our February lineup of events and conversations like this. And we want to make sure that you can have a front row seat for those as well. So if you're not already subscribed to our newsletter, you can do that on our homepage on our website, Coffer Center Chicago. Scroll down to the bottom and look for the Coffer headliner. You will get news and notifications direct to your inbox, so you have the opportunity to register and stay tuned for future events. We do a number of things throughout the course of the week in addition to this conversation series, so hopefully we have something that you would find interesting to plug into and be part of community, conversation, and career and other supportive spaces for this time that we're in. It's been interesting to do all of this remotely, but it's been exciting to realize new opportunities like this. And I'd love to take this moment to invite Dr. Greta Pope to the screen. This has been born out of, conversations that Greta has wanted to host and have to see where people are at and how people are doing during this time of remote distancing and during the pandemic. Greta, thank you so much once again for being with us.
Well, thank you, Jess. I'm delighted to be offering SoundCheck to people. I think we've really begun to build wonderful community amongst our members, and it's just really great. So I thank you for hosting this or for allowing this to occur.
Well, it is our pleasure. And, I've said it before and I've said it again that, it is one of the things that I miss about being together in our physical space, which is sitting down and just checking in with one another and hearing what people are up to. We used to do that over literal coffee together in the center, and now we're doing it with our coffee at our computers, but it's no less a balm to my soul to hear how people are doing, wherever and however they're doing it. So without further ado, I look forward to this conversation that you're having today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jess. Well, hey there, and welcome to SoundCheck. I'm Dr. Greta Pope, and I'm so excited to have this opportunity to visit with creatives from a variety of disciplines about their professional journey. We are in the midst of a pandemic that has changed all of our lives and the ways in which we work. We will use this forum to share our thoughts, feelings, and best practices for surviving this challenging time. I am very excited today to have an old friend, Jay Disney, with us. It is just such an exciting thing. Jay is best known for his performances spanning father figures to rockers to psychopathic killers. Jay began his career on stage, but found his passion working in front of the camera and is tireless in his pursuit of craft. With his excellent ear for dialects, including American, he seamlessly morphs into his characterizations with a chameleon-like effortlessness. Henri, do we have Jay's demo? Are we set with that?
My TV won't work.
Well, give me a minute.
What's wrong?
I'm kind of not dressed here.
I've seen you naked before, Frank.
Well, it's sad. I mean, it's like she's walking in this fog. And I can see her, but she can't catch a glimpse of me. Sometimes the fog lifts and she does, though.
Hey, Tommy!
Nice to see you.
How you doing, man?
Well,
You show up in a towel, huh?
Yeah.
I like that. Hey, how are you, buddy? How you doing?
Hey, oh, that's okay.
Oh, you a little shy?
No, I'm fine.
That's cute. I like that.
Did you ever stop and think about me? I mean, you always complain that Mom was the one who abandoned the family, but it wasn't her. No, it was you who broke us apart. She was so tired of you being an alcoholic asshole, she couldn't stand to be around you anymore. Do you think I want that? Do you think that I want to be here right now? The only reason I'm here is because there's nobody else left. I think Mom might even pay you a compliment today.
She better.
So, are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go. Why don't we call the studio and let's tell them that we're all gonna take a day off because Corey Feldman is tired.
I can do it, okay? Just give me a minute.
Take all the time you need.
Thanks.
Because you're fired.
Fired? What, because I couldn't sleep? Man, come on,
Was I not clear when you were sitting right back here? Was I not clear?
if you just give me a...
Get the hell off my set!
Never mind. It's no problem. I'll take care of it.
It's sex. It's just sex. Now, can you say that? Just sex. Can I please have my coffee now? Sure. I thought I'd be discussing my damn sex life with my dad before coffee.
Okay, well, that was quite spectacular. Quite spectacular. So why don't we go ahead and bring Jay on? Jay, how are you?
Hang on a second. There we go. Hello, I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, number one. It's a great pleasure to do this.
Absolutely. It is so great to see you.
You too.
Your demo is so impressive. You look great.
Well, thank you. It's a little long, but we'll fix that.
Okay, people enjoyed it, I think.
Oh, I hope.
You seem to be doing very, very well in LA, and people here in Chicago miss you.
Oh, I really, Chicago was seminal for me, and I miss it, but I don't miss the weather. You know, I love LA. Many years ago, when Jess was my agent, we had a discussion, and she actually said to me, you know, Jay, I think you actually would be better in LA. And she was right. You know, I really do love it out here, and a lot of people don't, and a lot of people get burned out very quickly. So it's a mindset, and I just like it. Works.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, it's wonderful to see you.
You too.
We want to know a little bit about you. Where did you grow up? Let's go back to the beginning. Let's kind of trace your life and see how you got to where you are today.
I grew up in Illinois. I grew up in central Illinois, and I went to the University of Illinois and got a degree there in theater. And there were several people who were in with my program who later on went to do great things. Ang Lee was one of them. Bob Greenblatt, who became the president of NBC and Showtime and all of that, was another one of them. And several people on TV that you may or may not know. And then I moved to Minneapolis, where I worked in the professional theater there and did commercials. And that's where I got my AFTRA card, was in Minneapolis. Then moved to Memphis, Dallas, and then Chicago. And then here. So along the way, I would do theater, but actually, even from the very beginning, I was more interested in film. So it was one of those things of finding where you needed to be. And that's where Chicago came into it, is because that's where the film community opened its arms and embraced me. And that was a really very, very important for me.
Yeah, that's great. So how old were you when you knew you wanted to be an actor? How did that come about for you?
I originally had wanted to be a concert pianist.
And I realized that I didn't have the technique or the passion, the single-mindedness to follow that through, because I remember reading Arthur Rubinstein's biography, and he said that basically he is music, and he wasn't being conceited. It was like that's all he was thinking about all the time. And I realized that I didn't have that kind of passion for it, and I had been doing theatrics and stuff, all of that. So it was very early on. It was a creative outlet that, and I still do this even now, which is that when I'm looking at a script, I will analyze it and use that as the springboard and try to work as closely as possible from what the word is, which is exactly what you do in music. You play a Chopin nocturne, you don't rewrite it. You interpret the notes. And that's the way I look at scripts, is that I try to interpret the notes. And only when I realize I'm dealing with a bad script will I say, we might want to change this here, or, it works better this way. But generally, I try to stay as closely as possible to what's written, out of respect for the writer, if nothing else.
Yeah. Do you play piano at all still now?
Yes.
Sure,
Yeah, I do.
You must.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Just for your own pleasure, or do you get out and play? Or
No, I don't get out. No, I studied primarily classical, and there's not much of a venue for that. So.
Yeah. You're right. I think there are venues for it, but you have to kind of, again, be sort of very focused on that and put all your eggs in that basket and go after it.
When I was living in Memphis, I studied with a guy who was from Juilliard, and I gave a couple of recitals there. And that kind of got that out of my system. It's like, all right, you did this, you set these goals to do it, and it's done. Move on.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I read something about you that you have a very good ear for dialect.
Mm-hmm.
And now this musical talent that you have kind of informs my thoughts about that.
Because, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've always thought that dialects are like a key change, so that we start out in whatever your native dialect is or native language is C major, and then you shift it to C minor or G minor or what have you. And it's a matter of learning not only the notes, but the rhythm. So to me, dialect is really musical, and it's a way of learning another key. And interestingly, when I'm reading scripts, sometimes the dialect, even if I don't know it, comes to the fore. I did a film in Chicago, and I was auditioning for it there at the Calther Center. And the director sent me the script, and I was looking at it. And you know how when you get a script, you say it to yourself, because there were some big monologue things. And as I was reading it, I thought, this makes no sense. This just makes absolutely no sense. So I thought, I got to make this work. So I thought, okay, well, maybe he's not American. So I started reading it again, and when I got to Irish, it made perfect sense. So I emailed the director and I said, would you mind terribly if I did this guy's Irish? And he said he had written it as an Irishman, and he didn't want to say that because he was afraid that there would be actors out there who would not audition if they knew they had to do an Irish dialect. But to me, if it's well written, then the syntax informs the performance.
Yes, that's fantastic. And I think you're right. Dialects and language are rhythm. I've never thought of it quite in that way. And then
absolutely.
Also, musicians, we learn to really listen, really listen and really be able to interpret other languages and dialects. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. So you never know, as you're growing up and the kinds of exposures that you're having, how they're going to inform or influence whatever your career choice is.
Correct. And I think of the dialects as being another tool in your toolbox, so that when it comes along, you have that ability to do it. And just recently, I had the opportunity to learn the New York dialect, which I'd never worked on before. Wow. I was doing a Zoom play reading of Frankie and Johnny at the Claire de Lune, playing Johnny, who is from the East Coast. And as I was reading the script, I thought, there's only one thing this can be, and that is New York. He has to be really completely, utterly stereotypical New York kind of talk. Because if it wasn't that, it didn't work. And actually, it was written that way in it, that there were some things that it's like, that's the only way this can be delivered. So it was an opportunity to learn
a dialect and to get into that guy's skin in a way that I wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise. And I kept thinking, I can't even imagine seeing this without having that part of it.
Yes. Yeah, that's fantastic. So is this something that you practice regularly, or do you really practice it when you're preparing for a particular role?
Practice is only when I'm doing a role, because I think with a lot of actors, it's the same thing. You immerse yourself when you have to. It's like, there's no point for me to be studying British if I'm not going to be using it.
Right.
But whenever it happens, it's like you're learning a new piece of music. It's the same thing. It just keeps circling in your head, and your subconscious keeps doing it. It's amazing. And it's, I suppose, for the people that you are around, not COVID time, it can be kind of annoying because you're having a conversation, but your subconscious is always doing this in the background.
Yep. Somewhere else. Yeah.
Somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were initially a stage actor and studied that in college. How did you make the transition into on-camera work? Stage acting is so different from
it is. When I was studying theater, my teacher said, Jay, what you're doing is going to be great on film, but it doesn't work on stage, because I hated the bigness of having to project and to do all of these things that were not natural. So in my mind, I was always a stage actor. Always a film actor. And learning how to do something on stage was the vehicle to learn the craft. And I think that that's, unfortunately or fortunately, about the only way that it works. I mean, there really aren't schools of how to act for film, period. There are, but they always go back to stage work, because it's really important to understand the arc of a character and the arc of a script. So it's frustrating for
stage actors. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, it's just frustrating for me whenever you see casting people who, you walk into a really intimate film scene and you're trying to audition for this intimate film scene, and they don't have a lavalier, for example, so that you're having to project to the camera, which is 15 feet away. It's like, okay, you've completely destroyed the intimacy of the performance.
That's right.
By not understanding the difference between stage acting and film acting.
Yeah. So did this come naturally to you, or did you have to take additional classes? I mean, there's so many subtleties.
I am I'm very self-disciplined, and I'm a quick learner, and I'm merciless on my own performance. So I would watch myself and say, yes, no, don't like this, don't like this. If I could get through a performance or a shot of myself and say, not bad. To me, that was like, I just won an award, because there wasn't anything in it that made me kind of like grimace with, ooh, ouch, that didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's such an important characteristic for any artist who is good at their craft. You have to be able to sit back and look and be critical of yourself. You have to be able to do that.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't like looking at themselves. And I get it completely. Sorry. Cats and Zoom meetings.
Introduce your kitty to us.
This is Mr. B. He's a sweetheart, but
Mr. B.
like cats and Zoom meetings. I'm sorry, where were we? Where were we?
Well, we were talking about on camera acting and the subtleties and how
different
it is from.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty merciless on myself. So that itself is a whole different box of tools that you have to learn. But you then also have to learn how to throw the tools away. It's like when you're learning Shakespeare, or if you're studying Shakespeare. There is verse there, but you can't play the verse. But by the same token, you can't ignore the verse. You have to respect the verse. And I think the same is true in film, which is that you have to know the techniques, but you can't be a slave to the techniques. Otherwise, you really are acting for the camera and not acting.
Right. That's great. So as we can see in your demo and so forth, that you've played many, many different types of roles.
Mhm.
How have you avoided typecasting?
Well, that's actually been part of the curse, which is that a lot of casting people want to pigeonhole you as something so that you are the go-to cop, or they've got you in your list of you're the go-to dad, the nice dad. So when you do multiple things, that's great as an actor because it means that you have new things to work on. It's always exciting. But it's frustrating to get work unless there's a lot of work for that. So it's part of the juggling game of how do you stay employed but not have to do the same thing over and over and over and over again.
Right. It's an interesting thing. I've had similar situations in singing a lot of different styles of things, not being able to be pigeonholed or be that first call person for any one particular thing, because they're not associating a particular thing with my skill set. So it's an interesting kind of, blessing and curse at the same time.
Yeah.
So you're also a producer. Tell us
Yeah.
about projects that you produced and how you've done that. Have you been acting and producing in the same projects or doing different things? Or
Yeah, I don't like wearing multiple hats because I kind of feel like if you wear too many hats, then none of them are served well. I have produced mostly as the SAG-AFTRA liaison person because producers hate dealing with SAG-AFTRA contracts. And because I was on the board there and because of all that I learned through the generosity of Kathy Byrne, who is a marvel, you should all bow down to Kathy Byrne. I learned so much about the contracts and how they work. And because of my union work, I get hired because they don't want to deal with it. And they know that I'll do it properly. And I've been brought on many projects and they'll say, Jay, you're just going to deal with the SAG-AFTRA contracts. And so I'm dealing with the union here, or I'm dealing with the actors as they're on set. So I become kind of a liaison for the actors on set as well. If I'm there, they'll say, would you find out this? Would you do this? Like, fine, whatever. And to me, it's not that difficult because if you understand a short project, you understand a larger project, it's the same principle. The stakes are different, but it's basically the same thing.
Yeah, that's great.
And I also then explain to the producers what their responsibilities are. And a lot of them don't know. And that's also part of it, is that you're always acting as an ambassador for the union and educating the producers, because as we all know, a lot of these contracts change every 3 years. So you have to say, well, that's the way it was 3 contracts ago, but that's not the way it is now.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I'm sure that they really value your input, to be able to help everyone on both sides.
Yeah. I mean, there was a time when I taught for 3 years in Chicago, and I think that helps too, which is to be able to teach them, to educate them as to what the rules are and why the rules are.
Yeah, that's great. So give us an idea of what a typical day was like for you before the pandemic.
Exactly as the pandemic. No, I would get up, go, when gyms were open, I'd go to the gym, get my day started. That was part of my routine. If just whatever, if there was an audition, then you would do that. But even before the pandemic, a lot of the auditions were going toward virtual auditions, recorded auditions. So it was becoming increasingly rare to actually have to drive someplace to do it. And for the last 3 years, maybe 90% of the auditions have been virtual or been taped.
That's great. And how have you done them? What kind of studio do you have in your home? How do you?
I have a room, I have lights, I've got a camera. And the most difficult part for the remote ones now with COVID is that you have to have a reader on a phone. So it's this kind of, everything becomes about technology. You just want to go in, do it, and leave. And it becomes about, okay, how's the lighting? Did I do this, and the person? And then you have to edit it and send it in. And the good thing is that you don't have to drive 2 hours in rush hour traffic.
Yeah.
But the bad side is that you don't have the interpersonal connection with the casting person anymore. And that's frustrating because if you get the script, and we've all had this happen, you get the sides and you're like, I have no idea what the hell's going on here or what this is about. And all you want are a few questions answered. And I thought this could, I remember distinctly getting a script once and I wrote the person and I said, is this a comedy or a drama? Because I thought it could be either. It could be a dark comedy. I don't know. And they were like, no. It's like, okay. But I felt stupid having to ask that question, but it was not obvious and they didn't give you the information.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I miss having that interaction. Because also if you're in the room, they can say, okay, that was fine. Let's do it a little bit differently. And then you get to do another example of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So now the equipment that you have, did you have that before the pandemic or are these?
Yes.
You did.
Yeah.
So you were already doing a lot of this from your home.
Yeah. I'm doing a lot from my home.
That's great. That's great. So now in terms of how things have changed since the pandemic, probably not a lot, huh? I mean, probably.
No, not a lot. And I think that it's kind of interesting just to think that an industry the size that it is here and that everywhere actually, but here in particular, to have it shut down over this and to know that you have all of these people all doing exactly the same thing, which is staying at home, thinking, where are we going with this? What's happening? And nobody has an answer and nobody has an idea of when it's really going to ramp up again. Right. And I think it happened in Chicago as well as here, which is that I think Chicago actually ramped up sooner than LA did. I think you guys started back with like the LA show, the Chicago shows in October. Yeah. And I don't think we were just kind of inching forward then.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's easier for a place like Chicago to ramp up than it is here because you've got all these people, to take care of.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, that's great. So have you taken up any new projects during this time?
spending money that I don't have. It's like, not really. It's like a lot of the things are just things that you normally would do that you put off.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you have time for it. But then there's also the flip side of that, which is that you have so much time. It's like, I should clean out the garage, but it's not on my list. I'm sorry, I'll get around to it before I die, maybe, but it's not on my list. So.
Yeah, that's funny. So how have you sustained yourself emotionally during this time? Do you feel, have you had those days where you felt down or does it feel just pretty normal to you since your work hasn't changed that much?
I'm a pretty hermetic person to begin with. So the whole social aspect of it isn't that big of a deal. And I have friends, I live in the Valley and there are some friends I know who are in the industry as well. And around September, October, we'd all been quarantined for about 6 months by that point. So we would meet at various people's houses outside and have on Fridays and have a quarantini. We'd be socially distanced, we'd have a drink, there might be some munchies or something, but it was just a way to meet and to have this kind of face-to-face interaction that we were missing. So it wasn't a dinner, it wasn't inside someone's house. And then once the weather got cool, that's like 60 degrees and below, the quarantini stop. They'll pick up again. But you find a way to do it. And it's easier to do here, obviously, than it is to do in Chicago, because you'd have to, have space heaters for everybody.
Right. Back in the summer, I think people were getting together and people were doing all kinds of porch concerts and different kinds of things. But now people are like, it's cold here now.
Yeah.
And we're getting bad snow this weekend. And so people are.
But in so much keep saying creative, I've done a lot of Zoom readings of screenplays and then doing plays, theatrical plays as well. So even though you're not actually doing it, you still have to do the work. It's like I was saying with the Frankie and Johnny thing, even though it's not a real honest to God performance on stage, you still have to do the work. You still have to know the script. You still have to understand the characters. So it is extremely creative on that level. And with screenplays in particular, I did one. John Lawson, who you may know, he was in the Ohio SAG-AFTRA, and he would come to Chicago for meetings. He wrote one, a really lovely, he calls it a faith-based script. It's not a religious script at all. It's just basically about persevering through whatever crap life throws you. And it's based on a true story. And this guy had a lot of crap thrown at him, but he always managed to survive. So, you read these things, and John knows a lot of people. So R.J. Mitty, who was on Breaking Bad, was in the Zoom meeting. Patrika Darbo, who's won a couple of Emmys, was in the meeting. So it's interesting that you get to interact with people in the industry, even though you're not really there.
Yes. Yeah.
So even though there is a pandemic, I can honestly say that there still has been a creative influx on both sides, coming in and going out. And with a lot of this stuff, someone will email you and say, you want to do this reading? It's like, got nothing else to do. So, and then suddenly you discover that you're doing something that's really quite rewarding, that you weren't expecting.
Yes, this has given us a chance to kind of step back and reflect and think of new ways to make ourselves viable. That's really great.
Yeah, I did a spec pilot in December that just came out of the blue. And it had to do with it took place during the Vietnam War. And it was fascinating because I then had to do all this research about the Vietnam War, which is a very complex, difficult part of our history. So it was, and then we were shooting at the Riverside, there's an Air Force base out there that's supposed to be haunted, and they had a museum and all of this. And it was fascinating because I thought, this is just came out of nowhere, and it's really making a mark on me and educating me when we're all supposed to be quarantined, so there's been a lot of interesting, good things that have come out of this, for me at any rate.
Yeah, for me too. I think for most people, if you're open to it, most people have been able to derive much benefit from this. Yeah. So how would you advise a young person that wants to be an actor to get started? What kind of training would you recommend?
Well, first off, you need to decide if you want to be a theater actor or a film actor, because I think in the ABCs of it, it's going to be the same, which is that you have to learn how to connect with the person. You have to learn scripts. You have to learn the technique of rehearsing and performing. And then once you've gotten that part of it, or feel secure in that part of it, then you can veer off or not. You can study both. But knowing that they are two separate disciplines. And I, again, go back to music. It's like, do you want to be a jazz performer or do you want to be a classical performer? There's no right or wrong answer. It's like, which do you want to be? Very few people are both.
Yeah, you're right.
Like Wynton Marsalis, I think, was one of the only ones I can think of who successfully really did both. And there are a lot of stage actors who then go to film. Rarely happens the other way around, that the film actor goes to the stage.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting to me when I see the really famous film actor in their first forays into film, because there's always kind of like, that was a little big, it could have been toned down a little bit. And then once they see themselves, they do exactly what I was talking about. It's like they're looking at their own performance and they're thinking, nope. And then they understand how to tone it down for the camera.
Yeah. That's great advice. So what do you think the future looks like for film? Do you think that we will go back to seeing first-run films in movie theaters only? Or do you think that first-run films will be available for streaming and on devices, on TV, etc.?
I have no clue. Not only do I have no clue, I don't think anybody has any clue as to what's going on. And a couple of years ago, it was at I attended a Women in Film Netflix event. I think that's what it was. And it was either that or a SAG-AFTRA convention, one of the two. And they had a producer who was speaking about the whole idea of streaming coming into it with all these producers and directors. And when streaming kind of took off, you had all of these people who were used to doing it in that old modality.
Yeah.
And suddenly that wasn't working anymore. And they were looking like, what's happening? You know, it was like suddenly they were looking into a void and they didn't know how to move, what the next step was. And I think that's the way the industry is now, which like nobody knows where it's going because it is changing so rapidly and so quickly.
Mhm.
It's like, how can you plan something next year when it's going to change next month?
Right.
So who would think that TikTok would become a thing, you know? Who would think that shooting a movie with an iPhone would be possible?
Yeah.
I have no idea where it's going.
Yeah. Yeah. I was on a wonderful SAG-AFTRA webinar a week or so ago about shooting a movie with your iPhone.
I'm
Just
sorry.
unbelievable.
It's unbelievable, but the cinematographer in me says no, you know, because you can't get the lenses. You know, one of my favorite lenses is a long lens with a short focal point so that you've got the face perfectly in focus, but everything behind it is blurry. And they use this a lot in the 30s, 40s, etc. That's my favorite lens of all time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't exist on an iPhone.
Yeah.
Sorry, it doesn't.
We're talking about software and various things you can get. It's just kind of amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
You could have like a 3-camera shoot and have your phone here and your iPad there. Oh my gosh.
I know. I did a teaser part. That's what we saw. Part of the demo reel thing called Cox. The part was written for me, and we shot it here in my house, pretty much. And I remember looking at the raw footage because the cinematographer had shot it on a Black Magic, I think it's called. I think that's what the vet camera is. And you get this footage and it looks horrible. I mean, you're looking at and you're just kind of like, oh my God, this looks like crap. And it's like, I don't even know where to go with this. So he edited it. He lives, not even a mile away. And I was sitting there with him and he put it on whatever the Adobe thing is that they do it. And he starts manipulating it digitally. And suddenly he said, this is where the magic happens. And he was absolutely right, which is that these blank gray images came to life in a way that Jesus, this is amazing. And it could not be possible with film. Yeah. If you shot something on actual film, you get whatever you get.
Yeah.
So it was a really educational experience with regard to how much can be manipulated with our technology, which is fantastic.
It is truly fantastic.
Yeah.
So, as an actor, you've had a great deal of success.
I would say that.
Do you have any advice for others? What would you tell actors about finding their voice and moving their career forward?
When I moved here, I had a manager, and she recommended that I do some of these casting director workshops, the infamous casting director workshops, that people would go like this when you mention them. And there are basically two kinds of casting director workshops. They're the kind that gouge you for hundreds of dollars. Here, these were like weekend things where you go pay $20 and you would sit and listen to the casting director talk to you, and you would do a piece and you get some feedback or not and leave. So it was a way to meet the casting director, basically. Like buying somebody a drink is the way I looked at it. If I met this casting director in a bar, I'd buy him a drink and there's my $20, we're done. But she said, if you don't do this, if you do not do this kind of force your way into their presence, it will take you years to get on their radar.
Yeah.
And she said, all this is doing is just cutting through. And even here, whenever there's, before they got, banned, basically, some of the people in the union would say, this is a nuanced discussion. This isn't black and white. It's not like it's pay to play. It really isn't, because they weren't guaranteeing anything. So during this process of going to all of these casting director people, I would listen to what they had to say. And it was fascinating because none of them agreed with each other. So it's like, okay, as an actor, what am I supposed to take away from this? And what I took away from it is that there is no answer. You have to be true to yourself. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe that you have something to offer. But if there's one casting director will say, everything has to be on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And if you're not on Twitter, then you're never going to get a job and I'm never going to call you in. And it's really important for you to have hundreds and hundreds of followers because we're going to utilize those followers in order to sell the project. It's like, what the hell? And then you would find 10 other casting directors who would say, I don't care what your social presence is, because if you get cast in a TV show, guess what? They have a whole department of people who will take care of that for you.
Yeah.
So there is no answer. And if a friend of mine from Chicago moved here and she's been on some TV shows, and I was asking her about what she was doing, because I thought, am I missing something? Is there a road here that I am ignoring?
Mm-hmm.
And I realized this is an argument that you cannot answer. There's no answer to it, because my path is not her path. Her path is not mine. How she got to where she is because of who she is, what has happened. And that's not me.
Yeah.
So for me to even compare, this is how to do it, there's not. I meet people at the gym when they were open, of course. It's like you meet people all the time that you don't know who they are. I'm talking to some guy at the gym. He happens to be the vice president of Capitol Records. Who knew? I didn't know.
Yeah.
You meet people at the gym who's a director or who's a producer, who's an actor. That's just, I would say that you have to believe in yourself and don't take it too hard, Yeah. And I think that a lot of people say that, but there is this kind of feeling like if you're not getting cast, if you're not getting auditions, you are the problem. Not necessarily. It could be you're not the flavor of the month. They're not looking for the middle-aged blonde guy.
Yeah, that's very good advice and so very true. Everybody has their own path.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, I'm going to call Jess back in and see if we have questions from our viewers. Hi, Jess.
Hi. No, I love that talk. And I will call out to the audience now, either here on Zoom or on Facebook as well. And I do have a question on Facebook I'll bring in. So if you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat and we'll bring them into the conversation. I want to harken back to what you were just saying though, Jay, because it's so true and so right and so impossible to fake. It's not a nonchalance, it's a sufficiency, a sufficiency belief, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you're investing in creativity and process and not outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Because people can set, even running into somebody where you pick that treadmill next to the guy that is an exec at wherever, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you start to have an agendized conversation. People can take that from your read, right?
Oh yeah.
People glean that energy and it makes them go, it's like the Buddy the Elf, like they don't, it bleeds inauthenticity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how can you figure out how you're going to collaborate with someone that is wholly inauthentic, especially as a performer, know? And I think that's like, I love what you're saying just about, there are those, variances of opinion in these types of like workshop meets or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And all you can do is take a temperature read on the gamut of things and then figure out, because all you can do is represent your one career, your one brand, and I think the more that you hear opinions like that, the more you get a chance to hear that and figure out what doesn't feel right for you. Somebody says this, you're like, oh, I'm probably not going to work with that person because if that's what appeals to you, I'm not going to be your flavor of the month, right? Because that's just not how I move about the cabin, right?
There's also a sense of desperation in some of these people, like I'm doing this, and it's like you're doing all this busy stuff, but what does that say about, what I want to know is, who are you?
Yeah.
What authenticity are you bringing to the table? And having done, act as a producer and director as well as actor, you are looking at people's audition tapes and you're thinking, okay, you see the other side of this equation now as to how are you presenting yourself? What is it? What flavor is it that you are to these people? Right. And all you can do is do your best audition and then leave it to the casting gods to do what's going to happen.
Right. Yeah. But I think it also goes to your point of talking about like when you become like the jack of all trades, you're also master of none. Like
Correct.
when you agendize all of the things, like
Mhm.
when I'm agendizing the impression I'm making on you and all of the things that you like, a story I tell sometimes is that there was an actor I worked with and relatively new on the roster, and he was seen by a certain casting director a handful of times. So it's gotten to the point where I feel like we could get some feedback because you've made an impression, because it's not like a one-off. And I call casting, I'm like, so what do you think? And they're like, well, I just can't figure them out. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't have a sense yet.
Mhm.
And so I call back the performer. I'm like, they don't know you yet. Like, because they just say they can't figure it out. And then the person says, oh, well, I go in and I try to give them an entirely different character every time. And I'm like, what do you mean? Well, I see myself as a character actor. And so
Mhm.
I look at every read and make sure that my characters don't feel like you've met this guy before. I'm like, so what you're doing is trying to impress an idea upon them instead of giving
Yeah.
them a performance, right? You know?
Yeah.
And so you're not doing either job well, because
Yeah.
what you're agendizing is the impression instead of the work, right? The
Yeah.
work leaves an impression, but if you try to prioritize the impression, you're not doing the work or making an impression because they don't know
Mhm.
you, right? You know?
Yeah.
I think I think that's such a good thing to think on, you know, because that's the more that you can just do what you do and collaborate with who you naturally collaborate with will lead kind of organically to the right body of work. So,
It's also interesting here because the stakes are a lot higher and it's a much bigger pond. And this, it's called show business. And there are people who are really good at the business aspect of it.
yeah.
I'm not. I will be perfectly honest. I'm not. I hate a lot of it. A couple of years ago, I was a +1 to it was the announcement of the Emmys, where they announce who's being nominated for what. And this is at the TV Academy, which is literally just a couple miles from where I live. And I remember getting all dressed up and going there and thinking, oh my God, this is the weird thing about LA, which is this kind of shit just happens. Somebody calls and say, you want to be my +1 to the Emmys. Like,
And then all of a sudden you have a shiny day, right?
exactly. Yeah. It's like, oh my God. So I'm driving, to Emmys and getting out, and I'm seeing all these people who are on TV series and people, like, Ed Begley Jr. is there and so-and-so's here. And it's one of these things that it's like, this is what's fabulous about LA, is that all of this stuff kind of happens, but then you meet some of these people and they are on. It's like, where's the phone? Where's the camera? It's all about the photo op. It's all about the networking and the schmoozing. And you never get a sense of who that person is. Exactly what you're saying, which is it's the image, it's the brand, it's the look at me, I'm here. And I'm not that person. So I always want to back away from that. It's like, I'll just give me a vodka and I'll just stand here in the corner and watch. And there are a bunch of other people who I know from union work, and we just kind of watch, and it's fascinating and horrifying at the same time.
I can imagine. Yeah.
But I think, there are people that are good at that kind of thing.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think the best kind of people are the people that know how to bob in and out of it, especially if you get to like a certain point and you're ever sitting, Lord willing, knock on wood, on like as on a presser day where it's like sound bites, right? Knowing how to make a sound bite, how to answer that question as a sound bite is like a different muscle parallel group of just being on, right? It's an agendized conversation, right? You're
Yeah.
making a sound bite, and then when that camera's off, can you have a conversation about, your kid's report card or whatever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, do you know how to be human?
And a lot of people don't.
Right.
That's the scary part, is that there are a lot of people who everything is, because the industry is so hard to really be successful in, that they focus exclusively on their career and themselves. And that's why you have a lot of people who never get married or have, they're always complaining that they're alone. It's like, because you're always obsessing on yourself. There's no energy going out to anybody else.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to actually bounce over. There is one question that Jay Horace Black had asked on Facebook when you were talking about cameras and iPhones and whatnot. He asked, do you use an iPhone to practice your on camera? And if not, which camera do you use to practice with? Because he's looking for something simple and a camera outside of his iPhone. So
Years
in the
ago-
topic of technology, what's your preferred methodology?
I have actually a Canon HD camera, and it's not an iPhone. The imagery on it is, to me, on an iPhone is very flat. Even whenever Maybe it's because haven't got it lit properly. I don't know. I like the fact that I can use a lavalier, which I have when I'm using my camera, so that I can whisper as softly as I want to, or barely make a sound, and it will be read, which is exactly the way it would be done in real life, so that you don't have to worry about where the camera is or where the microphone is. So that's what I use. But I do know that they do have attachments that you can use for iPads and iPhones. I just don't have it because I've got this other thing, which works perfectly well.
Right. And I think that's been true for a lot of people is, you MacGyver what you have. And a lot of people have found ways to change exactly like Greta, what you were listening to, just how do you use the technology you already have, like the iPad and the iPhone and the right tripods and all that. And now you've got like coverage, what I mean, on something you're shooting.
And then Apple changes its OS system and everything you have doesn't work. It's like,
which means you have to buy the next thing.
Exactly. It's like, thank you, Apple.
Marty asks, how much help does your representation contribute? How much is your own responsibility?
90%. Well, it depends. That's a difficult question because it depends on what kind of an actor. If you do a lot of commercial work, then probably your agent or manager would be the one submitting you mostly. If you do more film work, it's kind of a toss-up. For television, it's going to almost always be your agent or manager because you simply don't have access to those breakdowns. So there's no way for you to self-submit. So the manager or agent is really important. And most people here, when they're starting out, look at a manager first because the manager acts the way an agent used to, of finding your niche, trying to get your foot in the door. However, a manager legally cannot negotiate a contract. So if you get the job with just a manager, you either have to trust that your manager's not screwing you, or you have to negotiate it yourself. Or they may get you an agent. They may say, we've got all these things, we're going to get you an agent. And the manager will call an agency that they have a relationship with, and then that's how you get an agent.
And I think that's a big difference between obviously, LA and other markets is that to what degree, well, and New York too, I guess, to what degree the managers play a part in that conversation, and also to what degree the managers work with representation to, kind of drum up activity. Because we've joked before, sometimes, the buzz about a person is the buzz that other people start, right? And sometimes those teams conspiring are the people that, bring the activity to the table,
No, I think that managers here are unregulated. So that's the downside, is that you could get signed with an unscrupulous manager, just as you could with an unscrupulous agent. There are some notorious agents here that people's like, I just got represented by blah, blah, blah. And it's like, really? You might want to revisit that relationship, but they're so desperate to have an agent, they don't know that yet. And you don't want to rain on their parade. It's like, okay, fine.
But don't you think, though, sometimes it's their responsibility to make sure people know what they're getting into bed with? You know what I mean? Like, I think that's a catch-22 because it's like no work is better than, or bad, some work is better than no work, but bad work is better than nothing. You know what I mean? Like a bad situation is just going to like
the abusive relationship is better than no relationship.
Is it right? Like,
I don't know. That's kind of following that logic. But I just keep thinking, why don't these people just Google these agencies and look at the reviews? It's like you'll see this litany of this is a scam. Don't do it.
Or I think it's also kind of one of the benefits of IMDb Pro is you can see what a roster looks like that works with representation, and then you could kind of quantify the worth of that working relationship based on who's working and how are they working.
Well, IMDb, I would say love-hate, but it's not even love-hate. It's pretty much a loathe, tolerate relationship with IMDb because they are like the IRS. They do anything they like. And you are helpless to defend yourself. They post something about you. I've got stuff on my IMDb page that is not true. And I have contacted them and say, please remove this. This isn't right. Like, I may as well be talking to the cat, nothing's going to happen. And then I have people who say, I'm trying to get this credit and they won't do it. And I'm IMDb Pro. I put it up there and suddenly it's there. It's like, well, why do I have the golden touch to get somebody else's credit and they won't even remove a fraudulent credit from my own account? Who knows?
Ay vey. Somebody asked, and I do think we have to touch on it because I'm sure everyone's been thinking it.
I know where this question is.
Have you been in the pool this week?
No, that actually is not that's not the question I thought you were going to ask.
That is the question, though. Have you been in the
okay.
pool this week?
Good God, no. It's too cold.
It's too cold.
That water out there is 45 degrees. Wow. It is freezing. And if you think about it, the pool temperature is going to reflect however cold it gets at night.
Sure.
Because it's all going to cool down, and then it takes a long time to heat up. So, no.
So what did you think the question was?
I thought it was going to have something to do with my surname.
Oh, well, go for that then. Let's go with the surname question.
No relation.
Oh.
Okay.
Do you at least get Disney Plus for free?
No. I don't even want Disney Plus, to be perfectly honest.
Well, that's fair.
And there's this whole thought process that Disney is now going to try and take over the entire industry. So they're going to take over everything. And you will see these, it's like conspiracy theories. You know, if you go online and look it up, there are conspiracy theories about how Disney's going to take over everything.
You know what? I'm kind of a sucker for Disney. I wish I would be more upset about that philosophy or conspiracy theory, but yeah. Anyway, I want to ask a couple of questions before we go. We're coming up on the hour, and I joked with Greta last time. This is kind of my own version of the end of the conversation questions of Inside the Actors Studio. It's my list of what have you during this pandemic, and I'll throw a couple. And Greta, as before, you can chime in, however, with whatever answers you have. During this pandemic, what have you learned? And you could answer in a sentence or a word. What have you learned? Tell me something you've learned during the pandemic.
I think that it's what everybody has learned, which is that because everything then gets reduced and focused down to the most minimalistic, basic levels of your relationship with your house or your relationship with your spouse, and that's about it because you can't go out anymore, which is that you have to be at peace with yourself and all of that, or else nothing's going to work. There is, if you've ever read anything about monasticism, people think that men and women go into convents or monasteries to escape the world. And the monks and nuns always say the same thing, which is that no, it's exactly the opposite, which is that all of the problems and things that you see in the outside are concentrated in those walls. So that if you cannot exist on your own and come to peace with yourself and your life and all of that, being within those walls is going to make you crack. You will completely fracture. And I think the same thing is true with the pandemic. It has shown us all a resilience of how to get through things that we thought we could not get through. It's like I was telling you about that thing, have faith. No matter what crap is thrown at you, you will overcome it.
Yeah, that's great. In the interest of time, I'm not going to answer your questions, Jess. I want to hear from Jay.
Awesome. What have you started doing or stopped doing during this time?
I don't think there's anything that I have started or stopped, because as I said, I was pretty, much a loner, and isolated to begin with. I do a lot of emails. I've always done a lot of emails. Gyms are closed, so I have to do something else instead of that. Irritates me. But I don't know that I've stopped a lot of things. I drink a lot more than I did. And I know that, no, I'm joking. I really am.
You started a career as a mixologist. There you go.
That's true. Yeah.
What is one thing that you've watched or streamed that you hadn't seen before?
Oh, I've seen a lot. I was on the SAG nominating committee for TV this year.
Yeah, it's gonna be impossible to ask you that question then, because you've probably seen everything.
I don't know if anybody else has done this, but you get inundated with things in the last 2 weeks, like now, in the last weeks, unbelievable. It's not physically possible to watch it all. So there are a lot of things that I don't subscribe to Epics, for example, but I got to see Belgravia because of that. Netflix still send DVDs. So there are a lot of things that you see or you see part of, that you normally would not have access to, because it's just simply not on your radar. I don't have all of those channels, and I'm not paying for all of that stuff.
Mhm.
So you've seen a lot.
I've seen a lot, yeah, and it's not all been good.
That's fair.
And that's part of that is because the stations and the networks, they send you stuff in the hope that it will get nominated so that they can then parlay that. And so a lot of the stuff that you'll see is like, I'm glad that you sent this, but this is not nomination worthy.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think my last question, on a note of optimism, is what are you most looking forward to in a new era of herd immunity?
Well, actually, just getting back to what everybody's, getting the life back without having to have the mask in place for after the herd immunity comes, because I think that we have lost that sense of intimacy. There's a weird courtesy with regard to people trying to go out of their way and be a little bit more conscious of each other, because here in LA in particular, you've got everybody's the center of the universe, of course. So it's one way to start respecting the other person, and to start respecting each other. And it will be nice not to have that, so that you can actually see the smile, see the nuance of the discussion, as opposed to just hearing it. And many times, it's like you're in the doctor's office, they'll have the mask on. It's like, could you repeat that? I'm not deaf, but the visual of what you're seeing in the face is really important for communication.
Yeah.
So I think that, and having gyms open again, I had been going to a gym every day for 10 years.
Wow.
And suddenly gone. There was a serious psychological and physiological effect to that. So I just want to get back to normal on that level.
Well, I look forward to getting back to normal as well, but I
Yeah,
also sit in this moment of gratitude, because were it not for the situation, I wouldn't get to see you today. So
yeah, you too. This has been lovely. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Jay, for joining us. This has been such a pleasure. And you were so willing to do it. I was just thrilled. Thank you so much.
Happy to do it.
It's been great to hear from you.
You
look
too.
great.
Well, thank you.
Great. Your pool looks great.
My pool looks great. I defy anyone to go into it, but you're more than welcome.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Jess and Henrique. It's been a pleasure, as always. Jess, do you want to sign us off?
yeah, so I will say thank you to audience that is still here with us, and to our audience on Facebook. Thank you for being with us. We're getting ready to load up a new month of conversations, so keep your eye out on our channels, social media, as well as your inbox if you're subscribed to our communications. We'll get you that information so that you can register and have a front row seat to the conversation in the future weeks. We're also going to be releasing some more of our registration opportunities later this evening. For those of you that have joined us for our studio jams, those are going to be going live later this month with a new list of moderators for February. So we look forward to connecting with you in February 2021, which is such a strange thing to think of being around the corner.
Next week.
I don't know how it's February, but it could be February or the 4th of July. But whatever it comes next, whatever day it is, I look forward to seeing you all in it. Greta, it is good to see you as always. Jay, it's good to see you again. And to our Coffer community, we look forward to seeing you all soon. Have a great weekend, and stay warm and stay out of the snow if you're in Chicago. Bye, guys.
Bye.